A minute to go.
A minute now, or can we go?
I heard him say a minute to go.
My watch says 18:30.
Mine too.
Let's do 31 then.
I'm just that tripping.
Good evening, good evening. Welcome to our NMP Talk Show. Today you've got Afigi Lenkosi as your co-host. We've got a beautiful show today where we are talking about our future, our children, how to safeguard them. We've got our special guest who will be joining us. But before I introduce I let our guest introduce herself. I would like to welcome all our audience today. Today we are live on Riverside FM and we are live on YouTube. If you've got any questions, you've got any interaction to or anything to share with us today in our studio, if you are on Riverside FM, you are welcome to just type on our chat box and then you can ask your question. We will be able to to respond to you. And our guest, who is an expert in this topic that we will be discussing today, will be able to assist us. Today, I've got our special guest, Mandisa. Mandisa Mtembu, welcome to our talk show.
Thank you, Figile. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's
Or us,
our
because
pleasure to have you. Yes.
wonderful.
Yes, Mandisa, I only mentioned your name. Please introduce yourself for our guests.
Great. So, hi everyone. My name is Mandisa Tembu, and I am the CEO of Safeguarding Africa. And Safeguarding Africa is an organization that seeks to empower adults who work, guide, care for children or young people by making sure that they are safe, they are protected, and they are well, or their well-being is promoted. So that's what we do. We work with adults who work with children, and we give them skills and capabilities to protect, keep safe, and nurture young people and children.
Wow, very interesting. This is very interesting because we know our children is our future. Am I correct?
Absolutely, right. As you and I sit here, Figile, we were once children, and
Exactly.
something about the way we were raised led to us having the opportunities we have that bring us even here today, just on this show, right? So we cannot at all take childhood for granted. Absolutely not. It's a critical time
Wow.
in anyone's life.
Wow, this is very beautiful. I mean, we grew up in. I grew up in an era where children were just children. We're not. I mean, children were just children. Nothing more. You are just a child. That's what you know. You don't know about any skills. The only skills you taught, it's limited. But you are talking about safeguarding children for the better future. We all want a better future. So
Mm.
please briefly tell us, what is safeguarding?
So I'm going to talk about two terms here that will really be a big part of our conversation. The first term is the one you've just mentioned, which is safeguarding, right? And safeguarding is essentially creating a net of protection around children and anybody who is vulnerable, right? It's making sure that they are secure, they are protected, the environment that they are in is safe, and it allows them to grow, to flourish, to thrive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So safeguarding is very much preventative, right? We safeguard to prevent any kind of harm from happening. We put safeguards in place. If you think of a house, right? If you have a gate and a fence, right? There's an example of safeguarding. You are already thinking in ahead and saying, I want to protect whoever lives in this house, right? So I'm going to put a fence. I'm going to put a gate that is lockable, right? So that's what safeguarding is. It's proactive, it's preventative measures that we put in place to protect, to secure, to keep safe children, young people, and anybody really um, who can be classified as vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
The other term is child protection, right? So this one is now a lot more specific, right? Because now it's speaking to protecting of children. And so in this, with this term, what we're doing is we are actively, remember with safeguarding, we were proactively. So with child
Proactively, yes.
protection, we are actively guarding children, right? We're keeping them safe. So, for example, we have rules in place that say the stove must be switched on every time you are away from it, right? That is a
Mm-hmm.
protective measure. You're actively keeping somebody safe, keeping the child safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And these terms are, I'm using the home example because these terms are often heard in education, right?
Okay.
Schools usually think about how do we safeguard the child that comes to us at 8 in the morning and leaves at 3 p.m., right? But
Mm-hmm.
safeguarding and protecting children, Figilia and listeners, doesn't end at 3 p.m. That it doesn't start at 8 a.m. when a child is at school or a particular environment. It should be happening throughout a child's life, throughout their experience, whether it's home, whether it's a sports ground, whether it's school, whether it's a community activity that they are a part of.
Mm-hmm.
Anywhere where children are, we should be safeguarding them. We should be protecting them.
Wow. That was a mouthful to remind our listeners out there. If you've got any questions that you would like to ask, if you are on Riverside FM, you can just type on a chat box and Mandisa will tell us more about. She just mentioned the difference between safeguarding and protection. We lightly use these terms, and the way you are putting it today, it makes me think, you'll think you are only protecting your kids when they are here at home. At school, who's looking after them? Yes, we can
There you
trust
go.
teachers to look after our kids, but are they doing their job? I mean, like, you can just send your child to school. Some parents are just saying, you can go to school, I'm tired of you. Like when schools are closed, it's easier for me as a child. When are the schools opening so that you can go to school? But I mean, you raise something that is very, very, very important for us, especially as parents, that we need to know that we need to safeguard our kids, and this should be that we need to actively protect our children, and this is an
Mm-hmm.
ongoing thing that goes all throughout their young life until when?
Exactly.
When do you stop?
Good question. So I think the question is not when do we stop,
Yeah.
um, but the point for us to understand here is that safeguarding and protection evolves as we get older, right? So you might have heard me earlier referring to vulnerable people, right?
People. Yes.
So that means that outside of children and young people, there are other groups of people who are vulnerable,
Vulnerable.
right?
That's true.
Women are sometimes classified as vulnerable, right?
Mm,
Especially in times of crisis, women and children usually find themselves in the line of harm, right? So they'll be classified as vulnerable persons. Disabled people are vulnerable persons. The elderly are vulnerable persons, right?
mhm.
So the question is not when does it stop. The question is it evolves, right? You and
Yeah.
I right now are capable adults who are
Mhm.
in position to take care of themselves. But we have put measures in our own lives to safeguard ourselves and to protect ourselves, right? So it doesn't really stop, it evolves, right?
Yeah.
However, there are groups of people, right? Or there is a demographic that doesn't require active safeguarding by another person, right? That can do it themselves, right? And we call those adults, right? Fully functioning adults don't need necessarily active safeguarding and protection the way that children or other vulnerable people need it, right? So that's why the focus is always on children or any groups that are considered vulnerable based
Vulnerable.
on their circumstances.
But now, how do we do this? How can I safeguard my children?
Good question. So, how can you safeguard your children, right?
Mhm,
Before we go
mhm,
into the how, I want to just talk a little bit about the realities, because sometimes people think children are safe, children are fine. What do you mean children need protection or need active protection and proactive safeguarding, right? But I'm going to use a real life example. I'm going to share with you just some real life examples of situations that have happened in the last 2 years globally, right? So, in the last 2 years, we have heard of a case of a 3-year-old who was raped by two 9-year-old children, sexually abused
Abused, yes,
by
by a
two 9-year-old.
9-year-old. Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine, right?
Yeah, yeah.
This is a real situation that happened. A teenage child um, was so bullied at school that they decided the only way to cope with this is to take my own life. Right? Bullying taking place in a school where
In a
we are
school
sending our
environment, yes.
children and thinking, oh, my children will be fine. I trust the teachers, I trust the environment. But that child experienced such severe bullying that at some point they thought the only way to move away from this situation is to take their own lives. And they did, unfortunately. How many times really have we heard of young girls who are pregnant and the father of the child is an adult, an older man, right?
You,
That is rape,
it is,
right?
it
That's
is,
sexual abuse. It's rape.
yeah.
Right?
I didn't want to cut you, Mandisa.
No, please go ahead.
It's just that what you have raised now makes me think of how many people are affected by this, and most of that we don't actually look into it. Like if you say it's a child who's we'll say a 16-year-old is impregnated by a 34-year-old or a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old, sometimes a 60-year-old.
Or a
Um,
25
we,
year
we,
old.
you know, or a 25-year-old. We think that, oh no, she knew what she was doing, but is it really the case?
Exactly. That is abuse. That child has been subjected to sexual abuse. Right? And the law is so clear, right? The law in South Africa, for example, but also in many other countries, if I am under the age of consent, even if I consented to that sexual relationship with that person, it is still considered rape by in the eyes of
Yes,
the law because I am under the age of
the
consent.
age.
The law does not recognize me as somebody who is able to make a decision such as to engage in sexual relations with somebody and fully grasp all the consequences, all the possible outcomes of that interaction. The law says I am not yet mature enough to be able to do that. Therefore, anybody who engages in sexual relations with me is raping me in essence
Yeah.
because I am vulnerable. They have more
Mm.
power than me. By virtue of them being older than me, they have more power than
They'll-
me. And then, of course, we add the position. If a teacher, perhaps they are using exploitation. They're saying, I'll give you money for, and then if you want to date me, or I will pay up, I'll pay for something, or I'll buy you nice things, come and date me. So now there's all these other levels of exploitation that are involved in it, right? But
Mhm.
you see, the law that says anybody who's under the age of consent cannot consent to sexual intimacy with another person, right?
Mhm.
That law is a safeguard.
Yeah.
That
Okay.
that is the safeguarding measure, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Now, child protection comes in when we see that. When an adult becomes aware of this or a child reports this, right? We have to step in and say, hold up, this adult is actually taking advantage of this child,
This young child.
right?
Mhm.
They're
Mhm.
exploiting this child, right? They're
Mhm.
abusing their power by engaging in this relationship with this child, even if the child thinks or believes they are consenting, they're okay with this, they really want this, right? So can you see the law's already in place proactively? It's saying
Yeah.
these things are unacceptable, right? Now, it's when we as the adults in the children's lives become aware of this, or a child reports this, or we suspect something, our job is now to react and to respond, sorry, and report the matter immediately, right?
Mhm.
But figure what is going to get reported if even the child themselves don't know
They
that
don't
what's
know,
happening is
you
wrong,
know?
right?
Mhm.
No one
Mhm.
has sat down with them and said, let's talk about what happens when you grow up. You develop
Yes.
feelings, and other people develop feelings for you, and perhaps they might approach you and suggest X, Y, and Z. What do you
Mhm.
do? So we,
Mhm.
we go back to parents, we go back to also children themselves, that there are no conversations that are happening at home, um, or at school, right? They're not,
Mhm.
if they're not happening, if they are happening rather, they aren't effective enough. So young
Okay.
people don't understand or fully grasp what is meant by I am a child and I should be allowed to be a child for as long as the entire stage of development lasts
Mhm.
before I interact in particular things, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
So,
You know, yes.
go ahead. No, no, go
You
ahead.
know, I'm just thinking. You stated something very crucial here to say. They lure these kids, and to a point whereby the kids themselves, they feel like, you know what, I'm not doing anything, he is not doing anything wrong. I've heard of an incident not so long ago where it's an adult, a working adult with a child who is still, I'll say, it's, what do they call, interface, I think it's grade what, grade 6, 7. So he buys
Yeah.
fodder for this child, every day at school. And then he engages in sexual relations with this child. And this child ended up falling pregnant and never saw anything wrong.
So now, Figile, you're describing one of the methods that abusers use, methods that we as adults in children's lives should be aware of. It's
Hmm.
called grooming, right? Grooming, Grooming, right? Like if you're dressing yourself up, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
essentially, what grooming is when a person, right, will target a child or a young person for
Hmm.
the purposes of sexually abusing them, like in this instance that you are describing, right?
Hmm.
But he won't act on it immediately. No, he's going to take his or her time,
Hmm.
right? Gradually disarming this child, right? Being
Hmm.
overly friendly, being overly nice, developing a special relationship with this child. Maybe even saying things like, this is between you and me, this is our little secrets, you are my special girl or my special boy, or I really like you. And then the other thing that they do, in addition to grooming the child and disarming the child, is
Hmm.
then they groom the environment as well. So that person is liked in the community. Everybody thinks they're a wonderful person. You know, they are liked, they are friendly, they are Mr. or Miss Helpful. You know, they're just this wonderful and kind person. So no one is suspecting it. No one is
Mm-hmm.
expecting that out of this kind person, such vile behavior can result, right?
Can come out.
So
Mm-hmm.
they groom the environment, and by environment I mean they'll groom the parents. You know, they'll be very friendly with the parents, or very friendly with the teachers, or just like a generally nice person in that particular environment. So no one can suspect that they are
Mm-hmm.
capable of this bad, of this evil thing, really, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are also slowly and gradually grooming the child, disarming the child. And by the time the sexual abuse actually happens, as you say, unfortunately, the child doesn't feel, it doesn't see anything wrong with it. They actually think, oh, this is like the next step of the special relationship that me and this person
That we
have, right?
have. Mm.
You know? But let me tell you something, Figile. Children and young people know. Their gut still tells them, because the way we have been built and created, when we are experiencing something outside of the appropriate stage of
Mm-hmm.
development, we know, we can feel that this is wrong, this is uncomfortable. You know, why am I doing this thing, but it's a secret from other people? So they know, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's again where we come in as the adults in the child's life. Do our
Mm-hmm.
children, do our nieces, do our students feel safe enough with us to be able to say, you know, something strange is happening. I don't know if it's wrong, but it just doesn't feel right. Because that's all it takes. That's all a young person needs, is to be able to say something feels off, feels uncomfortable, feels weird when I'm around X and X person. And ours then is to respond appropriately and say, please feel free to tell me anything. I
Anything
won't
happen.
judge you. I won't hold it against you. You're safe
Mm-hmm.
with me. Tell me what's
Mm-hmm.
happening. And
Mm-hmm.
we allow that child to open up and really tell us what's happening. And when they're
Mm-hmm.
telling us what's happening, our response should not be, no, I don't believe that person could have done that. No, right? Our
Yep.
response should be, I believe you.
Hmm.
Can you tell me more about what else has happened? And then to lay out the plan of action. So we need to report this to this person and that person. We need to remove you from that environment because that person is still there, so that we can keep you safe and so forth. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so important that, so part of safeguarding, as I described earlier, when I said it's a safety net of security that allows the child to nurture, those are the things that should be in place. Open
Mm-hmm.
communication, educating our children about do's and don'ts, about their bodies, places where other people shouldn't touch them, you know, and then helping them to think about, when something bad has happened, where should you go? Who should you tell? You know, how do you respond when someone has harmed you, or has uh, threatened you, or has made you feel uncomfortable, or has acted inappropriately around you? What can you do to get yourself back to safety, but also make sure that they never do that again?
Mm-hmm. Wow. Wow, that's a mouthful. it's a,
I keep
it's a,
giving you these
let's
mouthfuls.
just break this. Let's just break this. Now, what is it that as a parent I can do? You did mention that I should have an open communication with my children. I should give them ways of how to deal with situations if they happen. But now, if it's something that happens, say you said we need to protect these kids at home or at school. Say something happens at home. You did
Mm,
mention, of which it
mm,
might be difficult for me as a mother for my child to say to my child, or maybe the way of response. So how can you help me as an adult to say, your child comes to you and tells you about somebody who's very close to you, somebody you
mm, mm,
know You think you know because, like you said, that they groom their environment. So
Mm-hmm.
somebody that I thought I knew is a good person can never do such a thing, such an evil thing to my children or to my nephews or to my nieces. Now, how can you help me as a parent to be able to contain myself, my anger, or trying to dismiss the child and the emotions of the emotions and the feelings of that child who is telling me what is happening in her life or his life?
Brilliant question, Figile, because yes, this can be shocking for parents too, right? Having your child come forward and say to you, a close and trusted family member has violated their trust and their safety in whatever way, whether it's a rape, whether it's a touch, whether it's by showing them porn on their phone, whether it's using language that is very suggestive and sexual that make the child feel uncomfortable. So there's many ways, right? A child
Mm-hmm.
won't just come and report violent, aggressive behavior. Sometimes the person won't have done anything that's really pinpointable to be abused, but they've made the child feel unsafe. They've made a joke that in your family is considered inappropriate, right?
Yeah,
They've
yeah.
shown the child, or they've made the child watch a movie with, very graphic sex scenes, for example, right? So your child
Mm-hmm.
comes to you and tells you this. What do you do? Right? How do you respond? You
Mm-hmm.
were right in saying there has to be a self-control element of not making this about you. It's not about you. So don't allow your anger to take over and then rush off and go and do something to the other person, right? Stay with your child. They've just come to you and they have disclosed something very difficult, something uncomfortable. Perhaps they're even worried about your response, actually, you know.
Most of
But
the time,
look at
yes.
exactly, they're right. Oh, I wonder how mom's gonna, what's she gonna think. But they've pushed through all those fears and they've shown courage and they've actually said something.
Mm-hmm.
So, firstly, acknowledge that. Thank you for coming to me with this. I can imagine it was difficult to push yourself to come and talk to me. I'm so proud of you for coming forward. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then the next step is to say, I believe you. I want you to know that I believe you. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And I trust what you're saying is what happened. And now I want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can ask them for details. Right? You can say, I know it's hard, but can you just tell me a little bit slower what happened? You know.
Mm-hmm.
And then as they're talking, if you're not sure or understanding clearly, clarify. Sorry, what do you mean by, he touched you in your funny place? Can you show me your funny place? Like clarify so that we're really clear about the details you're getting, right?
Yes.
Um, and just listen,
Mm-hmm.
just listen, you know, and comfort your child. They might be crying, they might be expressing anger, they might even be blank, you know, you're not seeing any emotion, right? And that is a coping mechanism. Some children, some people will just suppress emotion because it's too painful to feel. But just listen and give them the space to talk. And when they're done, thank them for relating to you this difficult thing, um, of this difficult experience. And then now start to frame back for them what has happened. So tell them that from what you're telling me, basically, or what you're saying to me, that uncle or auntie so and so raped you,
Mm-hmm.
or you're telling me that your cousin is bullying you. From what you're describing to me, that's what I'm hearing, that this was happening. So name it for them, right? That what you just described has a name, right? And it's a
Mm-hmm.
bad thing. It's a wrong thing. Nobody's allowed to do that to you. Nobody's allowed to make you feel that way, right? And now we have to do something about it. So firstly, we want to remove this person from your life. So you can't go play there anymore, or they're not going to be invited here anymore. And if we find ourselves in situations where they are also there, maybe like at a party or at a religious event, they are there and you are there, right? We will leave immediately, right? We will do nothing. We will not put you in any situation that will make you feel unsafe or continue to make you feel unsafe, right? Our priority now is to make you feel safe again and assure you that we are here for you. And then, of course, speaking honestly about involving authorities. If you must involve the police, tell your child, don't hide it from them, that we have to involve the police because what has been done to you is a crime. It's against the law and we have to report it so that this person knows that they can't do this and get away with it. And secondly, so that they don't do it to other people also. Right? And then as it unfolds, right? And if you feel uncomfortable as a parent, you feel unsure about how to handle these conversations, you don't feel equipped, right? It's important to, after making a child feel safe with you for coming forward to tell you what has happened, to then say, I really think both of us are going to benefit from maybe going to talk to a social worker about this, or to a counselor, or to a psychologist, or to a doctor, or to a nurse. People don't know this, but you can report an abuse, particularly of a sexual nature, even to a nurse or a doctor. You can just go to a clinic or a GP's office and sit down and tell them what has happened. By law, they have to record everything and then file a case on your behalf. They have to report it. So if you feel incapable of dealing with this by yourself, stop and think, who do I trust enough to bring this to so that my child continues to feel safe? Because there are adults that you're going to go to who are going to continue to compromise your child's safety. We're going to plant seeds of doubt instead of saying, I believe you, let's have a child. So be careful. Think about it. Who can I go to that can help me? If there's nobody in your family that you feel that way with, go to a doctor, go to a nurse, go to a counselor, social worker.
It's a great thing, Amandisa, that you have mentioned that there are other avenues that we can use to report such a crime. You mentioned police, and I'm thinking, oh, my kids are scared of the authorities. If you say, this issue is actually huge, it's a crime, I need to involve the authorities. The child might feel that they have done something wrong, even though you may try and explain to them that, oh no, this is not about you, we are not reporting you to the authorities, but we're reporting the perpetrator. Now it's a great thing that you have mentioned that we can also go to a social worker. I mean, it's a social worker could be an auntie who's visiting our house, and then you can figure out a way of introducing the child to the social worker without the child feeling like you are telling everybody with an incident that she or he entrusted you with. And going to a GP to say, oh, let me just take you to a doctor just to see if everything is okay with you. So that's another avenue that we can use, instead of thinking like I need to call the police and I need to see that it's not yellow anymore, but it's a white van.
Careful, now you
that
know
we're
your
scared
age.
of. Yeah, so yes, you may proceed with other things that we need to safeguard our kids to in our communities or in our homes.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought that up, that the police in any setting can feel quite intimidating,
Yes.
and the time I think they've done something wrong, right? But if you,
Yes.
like I was saying, if we go to our family doctor, this is a person we go to all the time when we're not well. So there's a trust already that exists there, right? Or we call Auntie Mang Mang, they come to the house, and then you introduce them, right? And I what I want to stress as well is that we have to be honest with children. You know,
Yes.
often adults think if we lie to children or we tell them a half truth, it's for the child's sake. No, you know,
Not at
children
all.
just like us appreciate honesty. They also like
Mm-hmm.
knowing the full story. What's happening? Who is this person
Mm-hmm.
that you brought here to come and talk to
Mm-hmm.
me? Why
Mm-hmm.
have you brought them here? Just be honest. This is
Mm-hmm.
Auntie Mang Mang or Uncle Mang Mang. They are a social worker, and you know what? They are going to listen to you and then help us figure out how to help you
How to
and how to
help
make sure
you.
this never happens again. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's
The
true.
other situation that you're bringing that we need to be aware of as well, Figile, when we talk about reporting and how to respond to those things when children tell us, is
Mm-hmm.
bullying. Physical and emotional bullying is so prevalent amongst young people themselves. It's
Mm-hmm.
we call it peer-to-peer abuse or peer-to-peer harm, right?
Mm-hmm.
When a child comes home and tells you so and so is picking on me, they're always
Mm-hmm.
picking on me at school or in class, um, and we take it for granted. We think, no, it's just boys being boys, particularly boys. Right? Boys are always sort of find themselves in that place where we don't believe them or we don't take it seriously, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you can explain to a child what bullying is, right? So bullying is intentional, so on purpose, deliberate um, behavior, whether it's the use of harsh language or
Mm-hmm.
that is demeaning and humiliating, or
Mm-hmm.
it is physical, where I'm being pushed and shoved and hit,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's all happening on purpose by the same person who's always doing it to you, or the same people. So there's a pattern, right? So if you notice that your child comes home and is always telling you about Jake, who's always pinching and pushing and calling him names, and it's like the third and the fourth time your child is reporting this thing to you, that's bullying. You have to sit
Mm-hmm.
your child down and say, "Hey, I'm worried about this, because
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like Jake is bullying you. Would you
Yes.
like me to do something about it? Because there is something we can do to make him stop. We can report it to the teacher. We can report to the principal. We can even report to his parents, to make this stop. So it's you enjoy being at school, but that so he can also be aware that his behavior is not acceptable and it's hurtful to others.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
in
Mm-hmm.
all these situations, we have to be really thoughtful about the way we respond to children because sometimes the way we respond can make children never report something to us
To
again
us again, yes.
because of just that one time where you, without thinking, dismissed them or said something like they are being too sensitive, and
Mm-hmm.
your child goes, "Okay, I'll never say anything again." And next
Yeah.
time it's something much more severe, much more
Big.
damaging.
Mm.
Can you
Mm.
imagine?
Yeah. Wow. That is actually, we don't really, we know it's bullying. I mean, maybe I'll say we privileged enough to know what is bullying, but now it is difficult to help your child deal with those situations. Especially, you mentioned that boy, we always say boys will always be boys. If it's a boy child who reports such
Mm,
incidents to you at home by a certain person who is doing it, like there's a pattern of them doing it to them on a day, almost on a daily basis. Now, how do we're living a very busy life. You know that,
mm,
Mandisa. But as
yeah,
busy as we are, what is it that we need to do as parents to safeguard our children on the bullying that happens at school or at home? Because bullying can happen anywhere. It can be
between
at home,
siblings.
be at school. So how do as parents work around that and to ensure that we don't dismiss this bullying? You did mention that we need to notice that the child is talking about the same person over and over again, or a certain group that says some things that are hurtful to that child. Now, how do as parents deal with that? That's my first question. And again, now I take this to the school. We report to the school, or we
Mm,
report to the parents. And as a parent, I will never agree that my child is a bully, you know?
mm,
But what happens at school shows that my child is a bully. Now, how do I make sure that we don't hit this thing up, to involve so many people that are not going to help the situation?
mm, mm. Okay. So the first part of your question was, how do I respond to the parents if I notice or suspect that bullying is happening? Let's assume that you've had the conversation with your child now, and you're both on the same page, and the page is that your child is unfortunately being bullied. Fine.
Mhm,
So, firstly, Figile, if we go back to laws, um, every school is expected and required to have an anti-bullying policy. And
mhm,
in that policy, the school states that it does not tolerate bullying at all. And then it also outlines what measures it has in place to prevent bullying and to respond to bullying and to support victims of bullying.
mhm,
So if your child is being bullied at school, maybe even if they're not right now being bullied, maybe a good thing to do is to ask your school principal tomorrow morning when you're doing a school drop off,
mhm,
does the school have an anti-bullying policy?
mhm, mhm,
What does the school have in place to prevent bullying? And that usually looks like education and just like running campaigns around awareness over and over so that young people know that this is not allowed in our school, right?
mhm,
What responsive measures does your school have then when there is a bullying case, right? How do you support the child that is being bullied? Usually it will be like counseling, therapy to support with dealing with the emotions that come with being targeted in this
mhm,
way and abused really in this way, right?
mhm,
And then
mhm,
what supports do you have in place for the child that is perpetrating bullying, right? And sometimes the extreme of that is expulsion, which is removing them from the school. But before that, some really good schools that have good things in place will have what we call restorative um, measures, which is basically
okay.
when you try and rehabilitate this one who is
Mhm,
doing the bullying, right?
mhm, mhm,
So
mhm.
that's the first thing I would say, right?
Yeah.
If you are a parent and you are listening to this session, right, check with your school, right? Do they have this in place? And if they
Mhm,
don't have this in place, demand and ask them, when are you going to put it in place?
mhm,
And because by law, schools have to have measures and rules and policies in
mhm,
place that protect children, but also that help a child who has now been harmed. Right.
mhm, mhm. Wow.
You then spoke about what if my child is the one
Mhm,
that's doing the bullying, right?
mhm.
And no parent wants to admit to this, right?
I don't want
Um,
to hear it, even if I can notice that he's got like some traits of being a bully, but I don't
exactly.
want to accept it as a parent.
No, because
Mhm.
all our children are angels. They're good people.
Yes,
They've never done something like that, right? But the truth
yes,
is, for bullying to take place, we need a bully, right? There must be a
yes.
bully. So somebody is,
Mhm,
is doing the bullying. And listen, just because your child has been identified as um, demonstrating aggressive behavior, whether it's through language or physically towards their peers. They are harsh, they are abrasive, they are mean, they have a mean streak. It doesn't mean that
mhm,
that child is now a write off, they'll be bad for all their life. No, right?
mhm,
This is
mhm.
learned behavior. They
Yeah,
learned this some way. So the first thing to do is to firstly
unlearn
say to
it.
that child, I'm noticing some behaviors that worry me. Can I give some examples? And give them examples, I always see you teasing your cousin who's smaller than you. Or I always see you pushing children who are smaller than you. That worries me because it's not kind behavior. Where are you learning that behavior from? Where do you see it? You know, um, and yeah, where are you learning it from? Where are you seeing it? Right. And they'll tell you, right? Oh, I watch wrestling on Sundays, and that's where I see my favorite wrestler, body slamming people, and I want to go and body slam somebody. And then they say,
Yes.
oh, okay. So that show with two people who are the same size, who are in agreement to fight, is leading you to think you should go and do the same thing with people who are smaller than you. Let's talk about why that's not okay. Let's talk about why that's not safe. Let's talk about why that does not reflect the values and the traits you want to see in you, right? That will help you be a successful human being, right? So they can unlearn it. They learned it some way. They can unlearn it.
We can still
Sometimes,
unlearn
unfortunately, they are learning it at home from us. They are
it.
listening to us talk to each other as mom and dad,
As
or
parents,
as
yes,
as
or
parents,
siblings,
or as
or whoever.
aunties, and exactly. And they're seeing us that this one who's stronger, or whatever power he has, you know, uh, gets away with saying horrible things to other people, or with slamming doors and pushing people. So sometimes they sing it from us. And
Yeah.
we have to be open to our children giving us that feedback, and then say to them, let's unlearn together.
Mm-hmm.
you know let's
Mm-hmm.
let's together choose the kind of behaviors we want to see ourselves demonstrating, and then work on it slowly. you know
Yeah. Yeah. Before we proceed, Mandisa, there's Byron. Byron, thank you for joining us on Riverside FM. Byron is asking, in a school setting, what are the available steps known in the country to handle reports of bullying that have resulted in
Okay,
bodily
bodily
harm?
harm. Yeah, that's a very good one, and an unfortunate one that happens as well. um Byron, so the school will have its policy and its own responsive measures. It should. If it doesn't have those in place, really reconsider having a child there, because it's not good practice, right?
Mm-hmm.
But even with those measures in place, right, you still have the right, especially when there's been extreme, or when there's been bodily harm, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have the right to go straight to the authorities by yourself without going to the school. So again, you can go to a social worker, you can go to the police station and file a report that my child has experienced bodily harm. Here it is, their arm is sprained, whatever's happened, at the hands of another child within the school. And the way that the law will handle it is they will look at the role of the school in this, as well as the two children involved, right? The two children's age matters. So if the one who's doing the bullying is, at a much younger age, it's not a consenting age, um, the police have a process that they have to follow for that, right?
Okay.
Because you still have to, help the child. We don't want to criminalize every child that behaves aggressively or behaves badly, right? We want to
Mm-hmm.
restore or try and rehabilitate as much as we can. So they'll follow that path. The school will be held liable too if they don't have a policy in place. They've not done any training, any educational work, um, any awareness raising work. They can be found liable as well for neglect, because they're neglecting their duty. As an environment with young people in it, you have to put these safeguarding measures in place and make sure that everybody is aware of them and understands them and knows how they apply.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I hope that answers that question.
Byron's question. I hope it answers your question, Byron. But if you've got any more questions, or if you need any clarity, you're welcome to type it on your chat box, especially when you are on Riverside FM. But if you are on YouTube as well, you can just type in your questions. We'll be able to get you answers for your questions. Now, Mandisa, you mentioned bullying. We're talking about bullying that happens in a physical set where people are seeing each other. These days
Mm,
there's this one that happens where
yeah,
I can be a bully, or I can be bullied by somebody I don't know, somebody who's hiding behind the internet or the social media platforms. How do you deal with
yes.
those?
So you are touching on a very prevalent type of bullying nowadays, because we are now deep in the digital age. More and more children from a young age have access to cell phones, tablets, smart TVs, all these things that mean that they have access to the internet and therefore can create profiles and create personalities and interact with other people there. And
Mhm,
because of that, that screen that's between me and the world and between me and others, that can make some young people think I can be mean and harsh and aggressive, um, and no one can do anything to me because I'm at home,
mhm,
I'm safe, but I'm typing these, horrible things at other people, right?
mhm, mhm,
So in this case, it's really again about educating, right? We have to have conversations with our children. And when I say educating, I really mean regular, consistent conversations with our children. It's not
mhm,
once off. You're not going to open up, you know, an exam pad and a paper and say, okay, today I am teaching you about bullying. After this, you will know everything. Done. No, it has to be regular, repetitive, age appropriate, right?
mhm,
So when your child starts to engage with the internet, right? Maybe you get in their first cell phone and it's smart and it has all the apps that they can use to chat,
mhm,
start there, right? Okay, we have some power now in your hands. This tool that I've just bought you gives you quite a bit of power, and it can even give you anonymity, right?
mhm,
How do we use it in a way that um, is kind, is respectful, um, and not harmful to others, right? But
mhm,
what if you are in a WhatsApp group and someone else is being bullied while you are in this group? You are not typing anything yourself, my child,
mhm,
but other
mhm.
people are writing ugly things and posting ugly things. Are you going to just press put a heart on those things, or what do you do, right?
Mhm,
Now we are starting to teach our kids about being bystanders. That you can even be a bystander online. you know
mhm,
if I know that a page exists where we go and we bully a celebrity or bully somebody,
mhm.
um and I log into that page and I like and I read and I laugh, I am a bystander, which means I'm also participating in this, just
Bullying.
not actively. I'm a passive participator. I'm a passive bully, right? So helping us, and then also helping your child appreciate that there are laws even against that. you know
Mhm,
Things on the internet do not disappear, not in the way that the applications make us believe. Nothing disappears, it's all there. So if you are writing something today because you think it's funny, or because you think no one, you're 12 or you're 16, it will never come up. It will come up. In fact, it can come up very quickly, and it can be used in a court of law to find you guilty of harming
mhm,
another person. It
mhm,
doesn't disappear, and it is illegal, right?
mhm, mhm,
So again, figured it's that talking with our children, that impressing the kind of values and the kind of individuals we want them to be in society. That's all it is. If we can just continue doing that, we will see a reduction of these things. Um, but also we'll be ready and able to help our children if they find themselves in harm's way.
mhm, mhm. Wow. Just to remind and thank our viewers in Riverside FM. If you've got any questions, you're welcome to type your question. Byron was answered with your response, Mandisa, and thanks to you on that. And if you are on Riverside FM, if you are on YouTube, you're still welcome to type your question. We'll be able to answer you. Mandisa, what else can you tell us?
In closing, I can just say that um, safeguarding and child protection, whether it's from bullying or physical abuse, sexual abuse, all these terrible things that our children can find themselves experiencing, right? It's a collective effort, like I said earlier. We cannot say that the teacher is safeguarding at school, I'm safeguarding at home, Granny is safeguarding during the school holidays. I'm not involved. We are all involved. So if you have a child or you have children in your care, very important, make sure that the circle of adults that is surrounding that child are all aware and all have the same understanding of these behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't want your child to come to you and report something, and you get up and say this is wrong. But they go and they report it to somebody else that you have, whose care you've put them under, and that person says no, it's nothing. So make sure that all the adults in your child's life that your child finds themselves with same understanding. They are all have the same understanding of what abuse is, how we safeguard, and how we protect. Right. Second, the other thing that I want to also just highlight is that safeguarding children also involves protecting their mental and emotional well-being. So if your child is anxious or is showing signs of heightened anxiety, heightened nervousness, they are a little bit depressed, they are showing a low mood, they are teary, they can't tell you why. If they've lost somebody they love, so they are going through grief, perhaps for a grandparent or for a friend, all of those emotional or psychological difficulties deserve to be attended to. There's another way we safeguard and protect our children, by caring for their mental health, by responding to their mental health needs, right? So it's a collective effort, it's a communal effort. The whole village must be involved and know what's going on. And then, of course, please, let's attend to our children's mental health as well, because that's how we get here. Like, that's how we also can make sure that our children feel safe and feel protected.
Wow, we still have time.
Great.
We've got
No,
3 minutes. As you were talking, I am going back to what we discussed earlier. We were talking about sexual abuse, where we touched mostly on an adult who is abusing a young child. What about the peers? Because it can happen in the peers. You did give us an example of where a peer was doing that to another year. I wouldn't even say they were peers. A 3-year-old and a 9-year-old. The
9-year-old,
9-year-old
absolutely not.
knows that this is so wrong. So how to deal with that situation?
But where did they learn it? Where did this 9-year-old learn this behavior? That's what we should interrogate. Right? After we have removed the 3-year-old, given them the medical care they need, and even the emotional care they need, because you can take that kind of child to a child psychologist who will do some play therapy with them to just kind of figure out how much damage has been done and what support the child needs and how they can help the parents to continue nurturing and making the child feel safe again, right? Once we've done all of that very important primary work, we have to do the secondary work of understanding, where do these 9-year-olds learn this behavior from? Right? What has happened in their homes, in their home, in their home environment? What has happened there that has led them to think this behavior is appropriate? Because I would even wonder, if can we even call it rape? Because is a 9-year-old malicious and evil enough to formulate that we're going to go and rape this one? Or may they have been acting out something that they saw on TV or at home? Or in the neighbor's backyard, there were people through the window and they bumped into something that they shouldn't have seen,
Mhm.
because remember, Friede, I spoke about developmental stages, right?
Yes.
Um, Even with sexual behaviors, there are behaviors that we can expect from children that resemble sexual behavior. A child
Mhm.
who is actually 3 or 4 years old can begin to be curious about their private parts, not in a
Mhm.
sexual way, but just curious. What is this thing that I have? Who else has it? Mommy, do you have this? Daddy, do you have this? You hear them
Mhm.
asking you those questions, right?
Mhm.
It's part of that development. At 9, that child should already know and be able to name their genitals and know that
Mhm.
I have this, other people have that.
Mhm.
They should be able to know that this is, somehow these things are involved in making children. I don't know how, but like that's how my baby sister came about,
Mhm.
because we have these body parts, right? So the
Mhm.
question is, but a 9-year old, no question, sorry, a 9-year old should not be practicing sex. You know,
Mhm.
they should not be doing that. So what has
Mhm.
happened? What have they seen? What have they heard? Who has maybe who has had sex with them? Right? Because
Mhm.
often victims of sexual abuse will go and act it out. They
Mhm.
won't think that they are abusing anybody. They'll just go and act out what has happened to them. You know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
of course, when these cases are in the newspapers, we just see the shocking headline, but we never hear back from the journalist that, okay,
Whoever
what happened in
reported,
that case?
yes.
What
Why?
was
What has
found to
happened?
have happened?
Why?
You see,
Why did it happen? Because there must be a reason why it happened, and how was what measures were taken to deal with that situation? Because I mean, a 9-year-old is still young. A 3-year-old
a
is still
baby.
young. If the 3-year-old
Exactly.
needs to undergo like psychological counseling, it means even the 9-year-old deserves to go
Absolutely.
through that to
Absolutely.
recover from whatever that has happened to them.
To them that has led
Mandisa,
them here. Exactly.
yes, yes. Unfortunately, we are out of time. The conversation can go on and on. We might probably invite you again to join us because I do believe that there's a lot that you didn't share with us or our
Yeah.
viewers out there. But
Absolutely.
I would like to thank you for joining us today and being available to talk about these difficult conversations that, as parents, we might be scared of touching or we might not think it's appropriate for us to talk to our children. But it is very important to know that we need to safeguard our children and we need to protect our children. And this is an ongoing type of situation. It doesn't end when I send my kids to school or to the grannies or to the aunts. It should be that it is a never ending process. And maybe you can
Exactly.
just give us the last word of closing.
Thank you for having me. And if you are wondering about how to do this more, you are very welcome to reach out to me through my organization. We are called Safeguarding Africa, safeguarding.org on the internet, and you can engage with us more. But keeping kids safe is everyone's responsibility, and we are here to do it with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mandisa. Thank you for that. Thank you to our viewers out there. Byron, we recognize you. Thank you for joining us. And thank you for being able to ask questions and get a response from our guest, Mandisa. And thank you for joining us. This is me, Fikile Nkosi, as I sign out. Thank you. Good evening. Hi,
Thank you so much,
Mandisa
Mandisa.
is gone.